Hello, welcome to Atomo. It is August 4th, 2023, and there's a lot going on in the world. We're specifically going to look at Niger versus France, and there's a big thing that just happened with the so called coup. And this is interesting when you hear the mainstream media start to use the language. Well, if they're calling this one a coup, then you know the wrong group got into power. So yeah, and this has some pretty significant or potential impacts with France. The reason for that is, France's credit rating hangs on by a thread, and as shown in the article that I will pull up for you. All right, so here we go. So the way the European Union works is they don't have a central bank. If you're a member state of the fiscal union, you just can't have your central bank blast out euro. You can't print yourself out of your problems. You basically have to get a loan from other European financial members. So there's a 605 billion pound bailout fund, but that is contingent on whether the ratings of these particular countries can stay intact, or else the cost of money really starts to go through the roof. And already with Jerome Powell raising rates over in the USA, then you have a choice. Do I want to buy European debt, or do I want to buy United States debt? What's the cleanest dirty shirt here? And at this point, if you want, you can, because of the way the yield curve is looking for the US, the 30-year treasury is not as good as kind of 3-month treasuries. I don't have the charts here. We can definitely look it up. You can get quite a bit in the near term, but the long term yield curve hasn't stabilized quite yet, but that is coming, and that creates pressure. This is all about pressure. So in this, it gives you some information here about what the European Stability Mechanism is. They're looking to safeguard the financial stability of the European Union. And if we go back to, and let's talk about before I get on to that, the credit rating. So right now, Standard & Poor has a negative outlook, and Standard & Poor is saying, well, look, there could be a potential downgrade to AA minus, which is a level down from AA. But Fitch has already been there. Fitch is going around. They're just out punching. It's like they hit the United States, downgraded them. They downgraded back in April the credit for France, brought that down. So, and this is the house of cards slowly falling here? So here's an article here. Standards & Poor maintains a French credit rating at AA. So the big one, the big people, us little people, can watch the big people fight it out, and this is what's happening. So what we see here is, as countries need bailing out within the European Union, if we go back and we think about, because it mentions Greece, we remember back, might have been 2012, 2013. Greece was having a lot of trouble, so they were able to get bailed out, but it was the call was austerity, austerity, austerity. And the Greek people didn't want to have this. There was a bit of a color revolution going on to push the very Golden Dawn, the right wing party, and get them kicked to the curb. But then they toll booth everything. So ports, airports, anything that was built with public funds, and the Greek people were allowed to enjoy the benefits of, then they get rolled up and sold off as collateral in order to fund these loan instruments. So by that, the call at the time was if enough of the southern periphery of Europe were to fall apart, then the European project would be at risk. So there was a lot of work with France and Germany to shore up that mechanism. Italy somewhat, but Italy needed to take some of the money anyhow. All right. So what's going to happen here? Now, Germany runs a trade deficit with Italy right now, and there is a Germany buys Italian bonds through the Target 2 program. And should Italy threaten anything, this is why Giorgia Meloni is a little bit boxed in. If she wants to make too many radical moves, and Germany can pull the cord on the debt and start to sell that out, but that will actually smash back into their face. So, and if that were to happen, then you'd see, again, the same thing that happened with Greece. A lot of the collateral, once you can no longer pay, instead of negotiating like you could perhaps with a bank if you own a house, the bank says, no, we're not going to negotiate. We're just going to take the house and walk away because you can't pay, or they might toll booth everything. And if you still can't pay, that's what these Eurotrash commies do, is they'll take over your country, toll booth everything, share the spoils among their folk, and leave you with the scraps. And then on top of that, leave you with a whole bunch of debt. And then say, if you go any further, we're just going to take stuff from you. And at that point, there's a talk that perhaps France is building up military in the event that Italy were to go down that path and say, screw you all, we're going home. Then they would seize some assets by force. That's just a bit of conjecture at this point. So overall, the European stability mechanism does rely on the major members maintaining great credit ratings so that they can cycle debt in the global market and not have that as if their credit rating drops and the yields on that debt goes up quite a bit. And Chrissy Lagarde is fighting tooth and nail to keep that from happening. So, well, what does that mean with Niger? So let's pull up. Oh, what's happening in Niger? Let's go here. All right. So Putin, and this is an article from July 27. Putin had an Africa summit in St. Petersburg, had like 30 African leaders go there, and he basically said, you got my support. Okay, so we think for a bit here. Look at this guy right here in the vehicle there. Prigozhin, the boss of the Wagner unit, or Wagner unit, however you want to pronounce it. And I'll read this out here. Prigozhin voice message released on social media says that Niger has the right to rid itself of colonizers. Well, hey, there is a big thing in this realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you are in that space and you hear people like colonization is bad, France has a big colonization mechanism right now through the Sahel region of France. There is the French Central African franc. There's actually a currency unit that they use in those areas, and that might be in trouble because in order to fund that money, they need exports and to pay the Africans pennies on the dollar for those exports. It's a mercantilism uh, way of operating. So it's possible, like, hey, well, what happened? Wasn't this guy in some sort of mutiny? He wanted to oust Putin. Well, things are not always as they seem. You can believe that. Go ahead and believe that. I'm skeptical of this. At the first purport that was it really a failed mutiny or was it a bit of a show? And what did the show accomplish if it were to be a show? Well, if we look at the coup in Africa, one of the big things is, and Georgia Maloney had this back a few years ago. So if we go to Google, and let me just check over here. Oh yeah. Oh, I'll pull an article that's not going to be too too friendly to the thesis that I'm bringing up here. So there's a video in 2009, and then it came up again. Here's November 26, 2022, that France is using the CFA franc to exploit the resources of African countries. And of course, this looks like this journalistic institution says, no, kind of like Emperor Palpatine. No. Probably just see Klaus Schwab in his Klingon suit. No, kind of like Emperor Palpatine, saying that's not right. This is fake news. And so anyhow, I don't want to go into the depths of this article. Just we'll bring this all together. So you have the economy in that region. You basically, over time, have the Africans getting upset that their resources are being taken for pennies on the dollar, especially, yummy yellow cake. France is a very big nuclear power. They have a lot of nuclear power plants. And it's thought that perhaps Niger supplies 30% of the energy that they need. So France maybe gives about 5% of all the profits back to Niger. And, well, what would happen if Niger were to fully control the resources of their country? What a great story. So you get some in the West saying, well, we have to bring their refugees and people over to the West because the West is good and it's the right thing to do. How about we go to their country and help their country be successful? Oh, wait, we can't. We still have oligarchs in the collective West still extracting resources to fund their little oligarchy and keep their people in power and do things like, I don't know, put a sort of government into place within the USA that's vandalizing the USA so that everybody gets to suffer, and France and their cronies and oligarchs get to keep little slaves underneath their feet. So yeah, just think about if these African countries were to have access to their own resources. You could say, well, then, they'll have their own oligarchy and they'll have their own problems. Yeah, fair enough. But then Africa can call it their own problems and deal with that accordingly. So, so one thing that Putin seemingly does well, here we go, back to Pooty Poot. What does he seem to do well? Well, Nord Stream pipeline gets blown up. Does Putin go and basically lash out against that? Nope. The Kerch Strait Bridge gets blown up yet second time. Does Putin go out and maybe throws some drones and missiles around in a little bit of a retaliation just for show? But does he like take waves and waves of military and go and crush Kiev where it stands? No, he doesn't do that. Well, what does he do? He understands the game board. He understands how everybody is playing, and he knows where the sources of the stability are of other countries that are opposing him. So, I talked about this before in other videos. You got two primary things. You have energy, you have finance. Both you need to plumb through the pipes. If your energy doesn't flow, then you can't convert that into productive capacity. Hence the problem with Germany right now. And France, being quite the nuclear nation, doesn't get impacted as much. But hey, lo and behold, Putin's going for your yellow cake, Francie France. Macron, go and give Trudeau another hug. You're going to need a shoulder to cry on. Because as Pooty Poot, my theory is that when Prigozhin, go back over to this guy here, this dude here with the Russia hat on, when Prigozhin did his coup, we could have seen a shift in military resources. They conquered Bakhmut, they finished Bakhmut, and it looked like that Prigozhin was going to coup against Moscow. Then they pulled a feint and moved their troops over to Belarus and claimed that, hey, Belarus is going to keep us because Pooty Poot's mad at us and we don't want to have Pooty Poot, destroy and kill or whatever, maim the traitors. Belarus and Russia are in a very, very tight alliance. So you think that going over to Belarus, and Belarus is not going to hand over these people? Most likely what happened is Belarus said, yeah, here, come over and rest. But while you're doing that, they picked up a whole bunch of units and shipped them over to... Dun, 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 dun. They shipped them over to Niger. They had a little conversation in St. Petersburg and said, hey, look, here's the game plan. I can help you shake up the game board and potentially open you up to getting your resources back. Here's how we're going to do it. Next thing you know it, we have a little coup d'etat, manila envelopes slide across the appropriate desks. The African leaders who are in on it say, yep, okay, we will support you. And the big thing is, let's cut into France's... Going back here, let's cut into France's finances. Okay, well, let's do that. So what happens if all of a sudden this long overdue coup, because of the built up sentiment within Africa, finally executes, and you have the CFA franc, the Central African franc, where that was channeling money over the France, now gets disrupted. And well, what happens if the new nuclear power, so Rosatom, which is the nuclear power arm in Russia, has about maybe 50 to 60 billion dollars worth of contracts in which you're building right now. They're going to need supply. Well, Russia can potentially pay you an appropriate dollar, or the countries that are building those power plants can pay you, maybe not dollar, but rubles, or whatever basket of currency they have, in order to get these resources. So then, so people in Niger will benefit. They'll trade one customer for another customer, and a customer that every time the Russian and Chinese customers show up, they're building roads, they're building hospitals, they're putting infrastructure in place. Whenever the collective West shows up, they strip everything out. So here you go. France, who used to be getting yellow cake at pennies on the dollar, who could process that nuclear fuel, then resell the processed nuclear fuel, now no longer has that. That impacts the amount of money that they make, and it has a big impact to their foreign currency. The forex trades then have an impact because they no longer have money to trade, and that starts to create a shift in their currency. So, and that can then start off a ripple effect. Oh, Niger, you're able to throw off the yoke of France. Oh, yeah. Well, there's some pipelines being built from Algeria going down into there's one small African country, name eludes me, maybe it's Fuso. Down in, if you take a look at the western part of Africa, where it kind of has that little curl, and it has that flat part with Nigeria, I think Cote d'Ivoire. There's a good small country there. It has a bunch of ports where they can actually move product. So while Davos is trying to fight their battles in Ukraine, basically Putin goes to the other side of the board and starts knocking out chess pieces. And if France loses their nice credit rating or whatever it is left at, whether it's a AA minus or Standard & Poor's finally says, yeah, we have to move you to AA minus, then the European stability mechanism starts to falter. And we also layer on the fact that Syria, we're going to see some motion within Syria to remove the vestigial elements of the United States influence there. Because, well, at some point, what we can expect is energy will flow up into the south of Europe. Italy's going to say, hey, let's give back the natural gas plant that Russia had. I think this is an interim move that they made back after the start of the special military operation. But I think Italy has to play their cards very, very close to their chest right now. Maloney has to go along with this stuff. But if Turkey needs then to route energy through Serbia and Hungary, then it won't be enough because Nord Stream was bringing in about 55 billion cubic meters a year. And the other pipelines are not up to that capacity. But if Algeria and Libya are connected into Italy, that can help make up the deficit. And then Italy has a chance to do what Germany could have done, which is to take in cheap Russian energy and sell that out and make a profit on the resale of that energy. And they didn't do that because, well, they caught a case of climate change, which destroys brain cells. And now they're stuck in a bit of a vice here. Energy is becoming a problem. And the other part that I say in the thesis I'm running is the finance is the second part of the problem. And as Europe starts to fall apart, you're seeing more and more shots being taken against the Biden administration in the USA. Basically, S&P and Moody's will do what they're told, but Fitch just basically said, screw you all. I'm working for a different set of people. Perhaps they're playing for the New York boys. So two factions at play here. Davos, which is primarily the Eurotrash commies, versus the New York boys, the bankers of New York who have control of the Federal Reserve. You see two big titans duking it out. You see the increase in the Fed funds rate, which actually puts pressure. So while Russia is hitting in Africa now, and there's been so much money dumped into Ukraine that the collective West is in a lot of trouble. And if France's whole colonization strategy falls apart within North Africa, And then Macron starts crying to Canada, for example, where I'm at, saying, oh, I want to get natural gas at good prices. And then there's a little, maybe that's why we have memes of Macron hugging Trudeau, and perhaps that's why they're going to do a little man loving, and maybe we'll get some LNG terminals showing up in Canada. So who knows? Here it is. If this coup holds, then we're going to see a lot of zippering. And I kind of lined up a whole bunch of players, and they're all taking shots at the Davos crowd. And then we bring in a little puncher comes in, Japan, and the Bank of Japan. What do? They are stopping yield curve control. So as all this is going on, Japan is going for the nuts. It's pretty crazy. Should we pile on more? Let's pile on more. So you've probably seen that, hey, during the villainous, I call it villainous because all the villains of NATO got together, had their summit, said, hey, Finland, Sweden, yay, welcome to NATO. And Erdogan, Turk's like, yeah, okay. I bet Erdogan got together with Viktor Orban in Germany and said, hey, Vicky, how about we're gonna play good cop, bad cop. We're gonna say, okay, and then make everybody go home from Vilnius. Say, oh yeah, look, Turkey finally said okay, this is great. And then Hungary just told NATO no to Finland and Sweden just recently. Piling on. It's piling on. So yeah, so sit back, grab your popcorn, enjoy the greatest show on earth.